Privacy is understanding that something will happen and go on in such a way. Secrecy is when my partner, or rather my spouse, doesn't have any idea, no clue that this is even a thing, right? It's never been shared before. It's never been seen before.
And there is a lot of intention of making sure it's not seen. Mr. Dale.
Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Another morning.
It is.
Is this number 19?
Yeah, we're almost at 20.
Almost at 20.
Almost at 20.
So we're almost to the, what is it, 90th percent? How does that work?
So there was, I don't know if it's still the 90th percentile, but I know that a few years ago,
Okay.
I read a statistic that in order to be in the 1%, top 1% of podcasts in the world, you have to make more than 20 episodes. Like most podcasts, like 90% of podcasts in the world.
Sure.
I think it's 90 or 99. Like it's at least 90%
Sure.
of podcasts in the world have less than 20 episodes. Meaning most people after 20 episodes they just give up.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot. Like
Sure,
we just spent the last 20 minutes
trying to figure out what's going on with Black Magic Cam.
Yeah, just trying to figure out the storage issue to record in order to record. So like just things come up, and yeah, once you get to 20, like you're in a high top percentile of many podcasts. So almost there. Almost there, man.
Almost.
Also, I just mentioned to you offline as well that I finally watched The Truman Show. Harkening back to...
In case I don't see you.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Good night. Such a good line. Such a good line.
Covers it all.
Yeah. I'm like, dude, how did I never watch that movie? 1998.
It's a good question.
Jim Carrey's excellent actor.
It was like his prime time too. Like he was coming out with a lot of films like during that time. Well, well, and I think
Is that his most serious film? Jim Carrey's most serious film? Because he's usually, of course he's like goofing around.
I don't think it's his most serious. I want to say there was some others that were similar to that. Is it? And I'm butchering the title. I think is it Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind? I think he was in that, wasn't he?
Yeah.
I think that one was less comedy.
Yep.
More.
Yep. You're right. That's true. That was a good movie. And there's some good movies out there.
I didn't see that one.
I think I remember seeing it.
Yeah.
I think I remember seeing it.
I didn't see that one.
But
so
yeah.
another one that like is interesting, like if you think about comedian actors. So Adam Sandler, right? Adam Sandler, classic comedian actor, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the best films I've ever seen from Adam Sandler was Reign Over Me, which was in no ways a comedy.
I don't think have I watched Reign Over Me?
If you have not seen it, go watch it.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic film.
Yeah. Oh, and Don Cheadle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It was a great film.
All right. 2007. Man, some good movies out
there.
Yeah.
So
back in the day.
The story, the storyline's excellent. And we'll have to bring it up later because there's a few topics that it's going to cross-list pretty well, I think, with some things that we haven't talked about.
Reign Over Me?
Yes.
Okay, so I got to watch it.
Yeah, you definitely need to watch
it.
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, it's true. I would say classically many people overshare and over-disclose. And you also, I think it's also different depending on where in the U.S. you are. Mm-hmm. So, like, typically speaking, like, northern states are known for being perhaps less hospitable or perhaps even a little bit more cold, but you have this whole adage that's been a thing for years and years of Southern hospitality, right? To where people are very like kind and cordial, nice, right? But then also they might get really passionate really quickly about things. And so there's definitely a dichotomy there, but I think that totally exists. But it also changes depending on where in the U.S. you are.
Yeah. The level of disclosure.
Yeah, level of disclosure, preference for privacy. Like, I totally think that exists. In some ways is cultural depending on where you are at in the U.S.
Yeah. Okay. So let's like then we've kind of zoomed it out to culturally. let's kind of zoom it into like relationships,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Because I think there things gets dicey.
Yeah.
And it's this question of privacy versus secrecy.
Okay. Yeah. Tell me what you mean.
When does privacy become secrecy?
Mm.
How do you understand the difference
Ooh.
between privacy and secrecy?
So I think there's a difference between things that we don't want someone to know versus things that they can't know,
Okay.
right? Or
Yeah.
things that we feel that they shouldn't know,
Mm.
right? So like if we, and especially when it relates to intimate partners, it's like,
Hmm.
do I want so perhaps this would be an example. Do I need to tell my wife every time I go to the bathroom, right? Or every time I like
Or does she need to come with you and see what's happening?
exactly. Does she need to see what's happening when I go to the bathroom? No, she doesn't have to see what's happening. I can have a level of privacy there,
Mm.
right? Because it's understood that this thing is occurring. So I think with privacy, you know something's happening,
Hmm.
right? You know it's occurring, and that's completely okay.
Yeah. You don't know the
You don't
details.
know
You
the
don't know
details. You don't
the.
have to know all of the pieces of that, but you
Hmm.
trust that you know this process is occurring, and everything will go on as status quo after it happens,
Mm. Right.
right? So if
Yeah.
I have to go to the bathroom, I'm going to go to the bathroom. I don't have to ask my wife's permission.
Yeah.
But I understand she understands, okay, as soon as I'm done, everything keeps going. Right. Right. I think because typically
Mhm.
what we think about when we think about the difference between privacy and secrecy is okay, nefarious things happening in relationships,
Mhm.
right? So if, for example, maybe a very common one is whether it's infidelity within relationships or pornography in relationships or
Mhm.
using substances in relationships,
Mhm.
right? There's a level of perhaps one partner may feel like, well, I can
Or like
do this, or financial,
financial
exactly. I can
infidelity, right?
financial infidelity. Yeah, that has become a thing, right? And I don't mean to say that that's not real or make it
Mhm.
sound as that. I find it a very interesting way to phrase that, even
Yeah.
being a therapist, right? So with that though, I think the key part that happens here is the fact that, okay, privacy is understanding that something will happen and go on in such a way. Secrecy is when my partner, or rather my spouse, doesn't have any idea, no clue that this is even a thing,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
It's never been shared before. It's never been seen before.
And there is a lot of intention of making sure it's not seen.
Exactly. And there's an intention to make sure that I never have to allow it to be seen.
Mm. Mhm.
And so it's hidden. And I would say that it's hidden because there exists a lot of shame in most cases.
Mhm. Mhm.
You don't
Yeah.
hide something that you're unashamed of.
Right. Right. Fear of consequences
Yeah.
once this comes out.
Fear of being seen.
Mhm. Mhm. So do you think so before we dive more into the secrecy bit, do you think that so are you saying that privacy within a relationship is not only a good thing but should be something that's encouraged?
I mean, I think it just depends on the relationship.
Okay.
I think that's completely relationship dependent.
Really?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
there's
Okay.
some couples that literally have no privacy from each other at all.
Yeah.
Whereas I know other couples that don't even want to, like, if one person's in the bathroom, the
Yeah.
other individual does not want to go in there at all, like ever. Whereas,
Mm.
like, I know some people, it's like, hey, like, it's not a big deal. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, they
Yeah.
don't care.
Yeah.
Like, and that can exist within that relationship.
Mhm.
Fine.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
So I think that is and I think that would manifest the culture of your relationship. Right. So I
Mm.
think that could be comparable to what we were talking about cultural pieces before. I think
Mhm.
different relationships have cultures around them.
You're right. Every relationship has its own culture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um so Esther Perel, who's a couples therapist, she talks a lot about like separateness and togetherness
Sure.
and how basically this idea of like how do you maintain your individuality while um maintaining the connection in your marriage and in your relationship and she highlights certain areas of privacy in the sense that well she harps big on like the she's big on like mystery, right? Where it's like there's still more that you can know about your spouse.
Sure.
Um, and so privacy in a way can create the privacy not so, let me say this, how privacy in a way can be a form of helping you understand that you're still an individual
Sure.
within a relationship,
Yeah.
even if it means for some people it might mean I go to the bathroom by myself, or
Sure.
for some people like this is
Yeah.
my thing, right?
Yeah.
So privacy can represent that for many people.
Sure.
For other people it's other things, right? Like,
Yeah.
okay, we don't have privacy, we don't care about the privacy, but I have my hobbies and I have these things that I do.
Well, and I think that would be the other manifestation of that, right? So
Yes.
for example, like, yeah, maybe it doesn't take the shape of, because obviously when you have kids, you're never going to the bathroom by yourself, or seldom are you, right?
Hmm.
Like your kids are coming,
Yeah, I feel like
like,
your privacy tanks
oh,
as
tanks
when you have
incredibly,
kids. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that's par for the course in many respects.
Hmm.
Now, with that, like, I think that's where there becomes a need to reinstitute some level, but I would call it more like individuality,
Yes.
not necessarily privacy. You just need to
Yeah.
be alone because you need time for your brain to be able to focus on one thing and not have to worry about all of these other things going on. It's
Mm.
not necessary. Like, I would
Yeah.
say that it's not
You wouldn't call
necessarily
that
that.
privacy? Yeah.
So you could call it
Hmm.
privacy,
Hmm.
but you may be doing something with someone else. So, for instance,
Mm.
if a mom is saying, I just want time away from my kids, I want to go walk with someone,
Yeah.
right? So it's
Right.
like,
That's
and
yeah.
she probably may disclose and share all of these intimate details and things, right? Like,
Yeah.
as they walk. And so you could say, if we're calling just the idea of separating privacy,
Yeah.
it's not entirely accurate,
Mm.
right? What's more accurate is she is redefining, she is reclarifying, and she is also then able to reestablish herself, right?
Yeah.
And practice her own autonomy again because she's lost so much of it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right. And
Yeah.
dads too, sure. Right. But
Yeah.
moms, more so, like, especially stay-at-home moms, like, that's going to be a thing.
Mm.
You need an opportunity to be able to say, all right, like, I can have a moment.
Mm. Yeah.
But I don't think it's only centered around privacy per se.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. That's a good point. It's not simply privacy, because I think some people could die on the hill of privacy,
Sure.
but really what they're talking about is maintaining that sense of autonomy and individuality within a relationship.
Yeah.
And it's like that can look different.
Mhm.
Maybe it's not necessarily privacy we're talking about here,
Yeah.
because then what happens is a lot of um, disingenuous motives. Like you might have some nefarious motives to use privacy as a means to justify your secrecy
Exactly.
in a relationship. It's like, oh, I don't want to be in his business. I don't want to be in her business.
Yeah.
I
So
want to respect my spouse. I don't want to be controlling. I
yeah.
don't want to. So let him, like, he has his thing. I have my thing. We maintain each other's privacy.
Yeah. But and I think that's where it's like, I think those become slippery slopes pretty easily,
Mm,
because then I think what can happen there is their communication doesn't occur, or rather communication decreases within certain areas and vulnerability,
yeah. Yeah.
or it has the propensity to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, for sure. And something you said earlier is that even though you can have privacy, it's not that you have anything to hide. It's just that something like respect, like, okay, like you go to the bathroom, go to the bathroom. But I don't have anything necessarily to hide from you.
Mhm.
And that's where secrecy comes into it.
Mhm.
And man, and then that, I think that also goes to the conversation of like honesty and transparency, where it's like, okay, I have this secret. I know you might want to know the secret, but I'm not gonna tell you unless you ask me.
Mm.
Have you ever heard
Oh,
that kind
100%.
of, yeah,
Yeah.
like I want to tell them, but I won't really share unless they ask. Like I won't really disclose voluntarily unless
Yeah.
they poke.
Mm. Yeah.
Like what do you think's behind that?
Well, I think that depends on what we're talking about too. I
Okay.
also think it depends on what, like, To me, when you describe that, it sounds like we're alluding to things like substances or
Mm-hmm.
activities that occur within a marriage or a romantic relationship that one partner might be okay with and another might not be okay with, right? And when I get the attitude of I'll tell them only if they ask, that to me is indicative of one partner's okay with this, the other is not,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? Or alternatively, like especially if there hasn't been some predetermined conversation around, hey, look, like, uh, I'm not gonna so for example, we use the bathroom example. Like, I'm not gonna tell you every time I go to the bathroom. I'm just gonna go. If you ask me where were you, I'll tell you I was in the bathroom, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a case a case in point. So you say you have somebody that's trying to stop smoking cigarettes or something, right? So for example, say someone has been smoking cigarettes and they're trying to stop smoking their partner, right? If they had a predetermined conversation about this, their partner's not going to they're not going to come and tell their partner, "Hey, just to let you know, I smoked 15 cigarettes today. Just to let you know, I smoked 10." Like, no. Because then effectively that's more of an authoritarian relationship in which their partner is in charge of their own
Kind of
recovery plan.
accountability
Yeah,
partner.
it doesn't work.
Yeah, it makes your partner a policeman or policewoman, and that really affects your ability to.
It's a slippery slope.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope to
Yeah.
get for your intimacy and all that. So they can support, and I mean, it's one thing for your partner to have to ask. It's another thing for you to want to disclose and for them to expect you to disclose, especially if you've had an agreed upon
Yeah.
discussion. Like, hey, it would. It's important for me to know about. Um, it could be smoking. I mean, yeah. What do you think about that? Like, for if a partner's like, dude, like, if I feel like you disclosing this habit to me is important for our marriage
Hmm.
because it's
I
destructive,
like
and how
every
would you?
time. Yeah,
What do you
so
think?
I actually don't think that like I think so if someone is in the place of saying it's important for me to know every time you engage in something,
Mm-hmm.
to me that automatically screams like, all right, there's a level of insecurity here, right?
Okay, let me add this
Sure.
element because usually what happens, at least what I see, is when there's been betrayal
Sure.
in a relationship. So
Hmm.
let's say,
Now it
so
sounds like we're talking about like pornography or
yeah, so
infidelity.
this happens a lot,
Sure.
right? So if
Yeah.
somebody's like, maybe they have a porn addiction, but then the porn addiction graduated to contacting
Yeah.
chat bots,
Mm,
OnlyFans. So there's like now other individuals involved,
mm,
and maybe they got discovered, caught.
mm.
That's where there's usually a lot of issues. It's
Yeah,
because
to
like
me,
you got caught.
yeah, to me, when it gets to that level, though, I
Yeah.
think it's a completely different conversation.
Okay. Okay.
It's
Yeah.
hey, you need to take some time to make sure that this is what you actually want.
Mm. Yeah.
Instead of trying to say like, all right, why don't you just tell me every time you engage in this?
Mm-hmm.
Because to me, then, I guess I would be considered perhaps more the school of hard knocks in this, or just in standard ownership of like, hey, look, if you're going to be talking to other people and you don't have this in line yet, like if because this person isn't going to fix this overnight.
Mm-hmm.
They're not just going to immediately like be like, all right, yeah, no, it's no longer a problem or a struggle. And if
Mm.
you say, hey, yeah, you can continue to be with me
Mm-hmm.
just so long as you tell me every time this occurs,
Mm.
I feel like that
Mm-hmm.
is now just asking to be hurt multiple times.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a
Well.
different scenario though.
Yeah.
Let me
Okay.
be careful here. So
Yeah. Yeah.
if that individual is saying like if there was a very clear set of standards around what is okay and what is not,
Mm-hmm.
right? And perhaps before this individual, maybe they didn't quite understand that, or what there wasn't a lot of communication around this.
Mm-hmm.
I do think it's not to say that there can't be breakthroughs when honesty happens and when things come to light. I think honesty can be very disarming.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so in that respect, there can be a lot of healing from honesty.
Yes.
But in cases to where things are perpetuating and
Mm-hmm.
have perpetuated and keep escalating, typically I would say that's a greater problem. Unless something has escalated to a point and it's like, this is what this is, see it very clearly, and this individual came to you and told you this, right? They were like, "Look, I just got fired from work because I was looking at porn on a work computer." Right?
Yeah.
Or I slept with a coworker and my boss found out, right?
Yeah.
Like that scenario, I think is inherently a little bit different than
I
your
smoked a cigarette
well,
or
your partner finding out about the activity with before you. Does that make sense? Before you
oh,
being
okay, okay.
vulnerable to share it.
Yeah,
Sorry. So
yeah.
yeah, so I'm
Yeah, that
switching
makes sense.
because now like this this brings a different level of ownership to the individual because in my opinion, the most important thing for an individual is that they're able to see their own actions for themselves,
Mm,
right? And understand the weight of those
mm.
actions.
So you feel like when somebody's caught, the premise of that is already shaky because they were caught. Like,
When someone's caught by their spouse,
yeah,
right?
right, by their
Or their
spouse.
intimate partner,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
that's I feel a little bit different because
Mm,
inherently spouses and intimate partners like already are have a level of like being with you through thick and thin to a
mhm,
degree, right?
mhm,
Being with you in areas.
mm,
And so work doesn't care. They don't have to care at least.
mhm,
Right. And so to a certain degree, it's like, look, here's the standards, here's a company policy, and you are more exposed in that environment. When you're found out by family, it's still within this family unit. It's
mhm,
you're still hidden to a degree,
mhm,
right? Or
mhm,
maybe you didn't care if you were found out by family. Like you see what
mhm,
I'm saying?
mhm,
Like
mhm,
so to a degree, this changes the paradigm still.
mm, mm. So okay, so this idea of sharing and disclosing issues, like maybe you're dealing with, because I find often when couples are, let's say, a partner was caught maybe watching porn, for example, um, and
Was this not okay in the context of the relationship?
yeah,
Okay, so
like it was
it's
not okay.
off limits in the
It's
relationship. Okay.
yeah, off limits, right? Or maybe they found out, and we could have a whole episode on like porn addiction
Yeah, we'll
or
have to
that.
get into that on another episode,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
sure.
But the issue of privacy and secrecy comes in a lot with this.
Sure.
So, so they were hiding this
Thing.
porn use, and then the spouse finds out that this is like this this is like a daily thing,
Mm.
or like a this is like problematic use of porn, and like you find this even in couples where it's like porn is not such a big issue, but it's like, dude, you're using it every day, and then also on the other end, we're not having sex as much, and our intimacy is not as, and then it's like, dude, okay, like what's happening here? And so there's this like discovery of a reality that exists that affects the relationship but has been hidden,
Mhm.
right? And so there's often a coming to terms with like everything that I
Thought I
thought I
saw.
knew
Yeah.
was happening. I did like there's this like it's like learning that there's a whole other room in your house
Mhm.
that you've never had access to, but your spouse has had access to.
Sure.
And people find this out even like with financial
Sure.
stuff. Like, dude, you've been spending all this money. Like I did. And so with that, it's like I respected your privacy, but now and I want to respect your privacy as your partner, but now how do I trust that what you do in your privacy is not going to um bite back and harm the relationship and impact the relationship,
Mhm.
if that makes sense,
Sure.
right? So like like so to what extent do we agree that in order, especially, and this is a hard thing with trust,
Mm.
right? Because then it's like it feels like your privacy is compromised because it's like now I never know, like I feel like in order for me to know if you're doing something I have to catch you because you'll never disclose yourself,
Mm.
right? So when are you going to disclose? How do I know that what you're engaging in privately you is something worth trusting unless you don't disclose, because you never disclosed about this issue and you never disclosed about that issue.
Mhm.
And so there's that, there's a tug and pull there where, so like I've heard, some couples will agree like, okay, if you end up, and let's also assume there's a foundation where both individuals are like, okay, I don't want to I don't want to watch porn. We want to grow together and grow in our trust, grow in our intimacy. We want to recover essentially. So they've agreed upon that. So now that we've agreed upon this, how do we go about privacy in a relationship? Because does that mean now, some people add the monitoring software to their phones. Some people will say, okay, I'm not going to monitor your software because I don't want to be your accountability partner. But I would appreciate if, like, within 24 hours, 48 hours of you relapsing, for example, that you told me. Because again, it's just so we're not going back to this thing of like we live in two separate realities where I think you're doing something, but you're not. And then it's affecting us. And it's like, oh, so it turns out you were doing that, even though you were portraying that you weren't doing it. Or should I not have to bother about that? So it's like, where do we draw that? How do we do that and still build trust again and respect someone's privacy and ensure it's not secrecy, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So there's two things that come to mind when you're saying what you're saying. One is, how does the behavior actually impact the relationship? I think you have to define that. How does the behavior actually impact the relationship? Not how does it impact it once you found out? How does it impact it actually before you knew?
So those are two separate things.
100%.
Yeah. So can you just clarify that?
So for example,
how they're separate?
Yeah. So if for example, let's say for example, your partner was smoking weed without you knowing, and everything was actually fine. There was no difficulties in your marriage, but then your partner comes to you one day and says, or rather, like, they got fired from work because they were smoking weed, or like that becomes a problem because they got fired and now they have no means to provide for their family. So that's a significant issue.
Yeah.
But if on the home front everything was fine in their relationship, like actually everything was fine, like then I would say that, okay, well, no, the main problem here is that you got fired and we need to figure out a way so that you can still provide. So you could argue that the marijuana is not actually an issue in this context. I'm not trying to advocate for this.
Right.
But I'm saying, as an example, you have to define first, how is that actually impacting the relationship? Let's say, for example, okay, financial infidelity, spending things without you knowing. Well, is this a problem because now all of a sudden things are like, we're spending all of our money?
Yeah, credit card.
Like, and we're in massive debt? Or like, did we not know and financially we're fine actually? And it's like, oh, you spent a lot of money on him and you bought all these things, but I didn't know. But I didn't know because it doesn't matter. Right? So, because I guarantee you, most people spend money without their spouse knowing on something. They buy a candy bar like, all the time. But it's not a problem. Why? Because it actually doesn't impact the relationship.
Yeah.
So we have to find out first, okay, how does this thing actually impact the relationship? Two, I would say, okay, now we have to determine if it does impact the relationship negatively, what is it actually coming from? Right? Where is that stemming from actually? And what I mean by that is, in certain cases, and certainly not all, but in many, a behavior is just a manifestation of an inability to be able to cope with a feeling. Right? I'll say that again. A behavior is simply a manifestation of an inability to cope with a feeling. Right? So we perform a certain action as a result of an inability to cope with a certain feeling.
Right.
Many people you talk to in many different areas, right? If you're looking even especially into addiction medicine, into any type of problematic behavior, you're going to manifest some sort of physical response, whether it's anxiety, it's like anger, irritation, agitation, right? And the classic thing I always ask people is, how do you know you're anxious? How do you know you're angry?
Yeah.
Well, I just feeling. Okay, well, how do you know you feel that way? What tells you that you feel that way? Are you hot? Do you feel amped? Is your heart beating? Are you sweating? Do you start to churn in your stomach? Does your stomach kind of feel heavy or light or cold? Those things will happen just because physiologically, that's what your body does. Your body has responses to you, right? And so I think that's the second thing that needs to be asked. Okay, so when this problematic behavior occurs, why is this actually occurring? What's actually happening? For many people, what happens within problematic behaviors in the result of a relationship is that there was something that was happening in their relationship, like there was distance that was being created, or something was not to the level that they wanted it to be.
Mhm.
And they started asking why. And they don't know how to fix this. And then it turns out that all this was because of A, B, C, or D. You fill in the blank,
Mm.
right? If we're talking about marital intimacy, like why is my partner not wanting to engage with me sexually,
Right.
right? What's happening
What's
here?
happening?
Are they
Yeah.
getting their needs met somewhere? Well, that's where that becomes a problem,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
That is,
Yeah.
it becomes a problem there.
Yeah. And I think the thing that makes it complicated is that oftentimes there's denial on the part of the partner who's hiding. It's like a lot of
Oh, 100%.
justification. Like,
100%.
oh, no, it's not. Like, it's not harming the relationship. Or it's not affecting the relationship. This is the thing I do on the side. This
Sure.
is the thing I do. This is my thing I do, and I just keep it. In fact, if I tell them, that's when it'll affect the relationship. So I might as
Yeah.
well even not even bother them. They already have enough on their
Yeah.
plate. They have. I don't want to cause them more stress, nuisance. So let me
Yeah.
just do this thing on the side.
Yeah. So this is where we have to be uncomfortably honest with the reality of our relationship, right? Is that actually going how we want it to go? Is that intimacy level there to where we want it? And we need to hear our partner say, yeah, no, everything's perfect. 9 times out of 10, they're not going to say that, right? It's better, like you could hear the same thing could be said. I used the marijuana example earlier. In most cases, like we talked about this, I forget when, and maybe it was
Hmm.
even in a different conversation. We said that
Hmm.
marijuana is the new red wine,
Yeah, we did.
right?
Yep.
For women over 30, right?
Yeah.
Typically, it's the new red wine.
Hmm.
Now, in many cases over the years, okay, yeah, women could drink red wine. It didn't mean that they would become alcoholic.
Hmm.
Again, not trying to advocate for your alcohol consumption or marijuana, whatever, but we're just talking about this as a thing,
Hmm.
right? So with marijuana though, like typically what what you'll see is all right, like one partner will bring it up and just be like, hey, you're totally zoned out. I'm trying to get things done. Another may say, well, no, everything's fine. Like I can still do all these things, right? Or I can still be engaged, or I can. The only problem is that doesn't typically happen, right? So you have to be okay with a brutally honest conversation with your family that you are around within all contexts. Because in most cases, they're going to notice something. They may not know, oh, like, yeah, this is, but in most cases, if you really want to know, you
Hmm.
really have to be brave enough to ask,
Mm.
right? Because effectively, you're taking a new medication, or maybe it's an old medication. You're taking a medication. Is this impacting or serving the purpose that I need it to with the lowest amount of side effects?
Hmm.
Right? Is that what's happening? And so you need to be okay to ask the question. And you could argue that you're performing a behavioral intervention when it comes to pornography. Is this really serving me? Hey, so I instituted this new thing. How do you feel about our intimacy? Is it
Yeah.
growing or is it decreasing?
Mm.
So if we were just to be objective, do you feel more satisfied in our relationship or less?
Mm. Right.
So
Ask those hard. Yeah,
ask
and
those
those
hard
questions
questions,
are the
hear
hard
those hard
questions to
answers,
ask.
right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
most cases we don't do that.
Yeah, that's true. And that's what, at least for me. So I'll talk about. I've had times in my marriage when I've had problematic use of porn,
Okay.
and it I would I'm the type of individual, not just for behaviors I'm ashamed about,
Sure.
but just in general, like because of my upbringing, I don't disclose as easily.
Sure.
I mean, it could be anything. Even if it's just like, oh, I broke a mug in the kitchen. It's like,
Sure.
I'll just clean it up, take care of it. It's like, let's not like bother my wife about it. But that this is how I grew up. Is like we just took care of you just take care of business and whatever. And again, like you have to agree again, like in your relationship, like where are we when it comes to disclosing this
Mhm.
and that? And my wife had had my wife and I had conversations about
Yeah.
it, and it's it was apparent to me that she would like to know, right? But then I would justify it as like she's already has so much on her plate. She's dealing with this. She's dealing with work stress. She's has her own anxieties yet. Like it's too much, and there's never even a right time to share. It's like she's dealing with it,
Sure.
right? So it's out of like I'm trying to justify not disclosing this thing out of out of concern for her, right? Like it's not a I'm being unselfish here, right?
Yeah.
Now what actually led me to disclose was at some point it got to a point where I was like, I want to be known by my wife.
Mm.
And right now I don't feel like she knows me.
Mm.
She knows certain parts of me.
Mm.
I don't think she really knows. I want her to know me and know the parts of me that, and again, like with the problematic porn use, again, it was inability to cope with a feeling.
Mm.
And obviously, like you could correlate areas of my life, times of my life when I was feeling stressed, when I was feeling overwhelmed, when I was feeling anxious, porn use skyrocketed,
Mm.
right? And I wouldn't say like it was, it's, again, when we talk about the porn addiction episode,
Yeah. Well,
we can define what addiction is versus
sure.
like, right? But it was definitely like a level where I was like, I don't want to be doing this as much. And I feel like these urges are hard for me to manage and just like put away, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. And so I was like, I'm stressed. This is how I'm coping with the stress. And she doesn't know a lot about that.
Mm.
Right. And it's not like our intimacy is like off or like just things that are glaring, like, hey, what's going on here? It's like, no, it's like things are, like
Mm.
we're going about, I mean, like she's like
Mm.
thanking me, she's like
Mm.
giving me lots of like words of affirmation, appreciation for like, like my husband is great, my husband is good, whatever. And what would happen is that it actually would incentivize me to keep not disclosing
Sure.
because I'm like, things are good. So why share?
If
Things
it's
are
not
good.
broken, don't fix it.
Yeah, if it's not broken, don't fix it. Right. But again, the one thing that I
Yeah.
kept coming back to is I feel like I'm not known.
Yeah.
And so because I'm not known, I'm not experiencing the intimacy that I desire, that we both committed to, that
Mhm.
we feel like we want to experience in our marriage.
Mhm.
And I feel like she's experiencing it.
Mhm.
And because she's like, it's like I just share whatever. Like
Yeah.
I feel like I can share everything with my wife, with David, and like I feel like she can share stuff with me, but I can't.
Yeah.
And it got to a point where that's when I realized that this is not a privacy thing for me; it's a
Mm.
secrecy thing.
Mm.
Because what I was worried about is, as much as I want to be known, I'm afraid that once I am known, I will be viewed differently.
Yeah.
I will not be valued or appreciated as
Mm.
much because of this thing that is now known. And so
Mm.
I'm trying to justify all these things, but really I just want to be known and seen and accepted. And that, so disclosing that actually then was a catalyst for me taking an honest look
Mm.
at all these other areas, like, okay, how am I dealing with my stress? How am I dealing with this?
Mhm.
And then now I could resolve.
Well, it would stand to reason that your ability to be able to be honest at future interactions and with how you were feeling, and perhaps when those things came up again, that ability increased.
Oh yeah, 100%. 100%.
It's interesting. I think I think about this in terms of points of authority, right? Like we get nervous because I think the unfortunate part is like when we think of telling our spouse or partner something, you get scared
Mm-hmm.
because they're seen as a point of authority. I think it's
Mm.
really,
Mm.
I think ideally we come to see it as, hey, like I have an opportunity to be vulnerable. This person may not be happy with what it is I have to share. That doesn't mean like that can still be okay. But I
Yeah.
think about a story here because a lot of times though, I think when this is done appropriately,
Mm.
honesty can be disarming. And then when you are truly honest
Yeah.
about what you are doing and your intentions and what your plan is, then 9 times out of 10 it serves you better at minimum.
At minimum.
At minimum,
Mhm.
right? At least it's going to serve you better. I would say in most cases, then it also will serve your partner better. But
Mm.
thinking about this loose example here,
Mhm.
I remember one time, like, my wife and I were in college, we were dating, and we were parking in a graveyard, and we were for I guess so we were making out in the back seat, or no, it was I don't think we were in the back seat, but yeah, we were making out in the car. Police car comes up behind us, like I roll down my window, and he's like, "Hey, can you tell me what you guys are doing here tonight?" It was like 11 o'clock, and I was like, "Yeah, we're making out."
Uh,
And that was his exact
okay.
response. And he's like, "All right, well, you guys have a good night." And
Yeah.
like that was it. That was all. And I was like, "Okay, great. Like, thank you."
It's like interesting. Okay,
Like,
you just said it.
yeah,
You
so
just admitted it.
yeah, because it was that's what was happening. Like I didn't have anything
Mm.
to hide,
Yeah.
right? I had nothing
Yeah,
to
yeah.
hide,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right?
And
Eh,
the police is an authority figure.
Yeah, he was an authority figure, perhaps under normal circumstances, maybe years before I might have been like, what seems to be the problem? We're just talking, or like right? Like,
Mhm.
no, that's not what was happening.
Yeah.
It was clear, it was obvious that's not what was happening. Right. So
Yeah.
I said, no, yeah,
Yeah.
okay, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
Is there a problem?
Yeah.
Right. Literally,
Yeah,
there was,
yeah.
and because I was fully willing to accept, yeah, no, there might be a problem. Right.
Mm,
If there's a problem, we can address it. We can move. But I
right.
said, all right, no, this is what we're doing.
Yeah. And again, that was
And
disarming in the way of it,
also,
'cause it's like, whatever, okay. Mm.
whenever I've, this kind of translates to whenever I've gotten pulled over for speeding, I never attempt to make excuses
Mm.
ever, or I really try hard not to. It's not to say I am infallible for making no, that's totally
Yeah, right.
completely plausible,
Yeah.
but I really
You
try
try
hard
hard
not to
not
make
to.
any excuse, like to
Yeah.
say, no, I was speeding, I wasn't paying attention. Like that's 100% true,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? Or
Mhm.
no, I knew how fast I was going. I
Mhm.
was going too fast.
Yeah.
You're completely within your right to pull me over. Give me a
Mm.
ticket.
Mm. Mm.
I've gotten out of so many tickets that way.
Which is interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because it says that your ability to be honest and accept all that comes with that honesty. Like it's like you accept the consequences. It's
Well,
like,
you
yeah,
have to. It's
yeah.
not meant to call a bluff, because I've also gotten tickets where the officer's like, "Yep, yep, okay,
And you
great,"
and they
and then
gave you,
and gave it to
yeah.
me. Right? It's like, okay, that's fine. You have to understand the consequences there. It's not meant to be a tool to get out of something.
It's like, if I'm honest,
Right? Yeah, maybe then
then
I'll get this. It's like, no, that's not how
yeah.
this is working. You're being so this. I would say that this comes back to that like we've reiterated this like so many episodes before, but
Mhm.
this is a values thing.
Mm.
I do the thing not because of what I hope I will get from it. I do it because it's the right thing to do. Right? It's
Mhm.
the right thing to do for me to say,
Yeah.
no, I knew how fast I was going,
Yeah.
and you're completely within your right here.
Yeah.
That's end of story.
End of story.
That's the right thing. It is the right thing for me to get a ticket. I was speeding.
Mhm.
That's it.
Mm.
It's your choice whether you want to give that to me or not.
Yeah.
But it's completely fair.
Mm.
Right?
Mm.
It is the wrong thing for me to say, oh yeah, no, I knew how fast I was going. Like, you're completely within your right. Totally. Yeah, just do what you have to do. Like, out of a desire that, hey, maybe if I'm super honest, then he'll just be easy on me. Right?
Mm.
That's the wrong value. Like that's not a value laden perspective. That is me still trying to avoid, actually. I'm just being manipulative.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, who's to say one or the other? I think that's an individual thing. You have to know.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
But with our spouses and partners, I think, again, the same rule applies. It's like, hey, I can be upfront to try to decrease the wrath. Right. Or I can be upfront because it's the right thing to do.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Very different.
Very different.
Very different approach. Yeah. And that's again like the truth sets you free.
Yeah.
Right? Because again, you might not be free from consequence of you telling the
No.
truth.
And there's going to be consequence to that.
Yeah.
Like there seldom is there never any.
Mm.
At bare minimum, you're going to sit with some of those.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like if I do something that I know that like doesn't sit well with me,
Mhm.
I'm still gonna have to sit with that.
Yeah, and that's a heavy burden to
Yeah,
carry.
if you have a conscience.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, if you have a conscience. And so a lot of it is like you try to switch things around so your conscience is not
To appease your
burdened to
yeah,
appease your
and
conscience.
that's what we call hiding,
Mm,
right?
that's what we call hiding.
We're masters of our own self-deceit,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
and so maybe we could also say we're masters of our own self-secrecy,
Ooh, yeah. There
right?
we go. Yep. Yeah, that's it. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
I feel like.
What many people, it's interesting. I think that many people hold secrets from themselves that are not actually private enough.
Oh.
Right. So I think there's a different paradox there. Like it's one thing when I understand true privacy to say that, hey, I don't need to be ashamed of anything, but
Mhm.
I don't have to share this with the world.
Yeah.
Right.
Got you. Yep. Yep.
But
100%.
I
Yeah.
also have no illusions to myself,
Mm,
and I can be okay with that.
mm.
I think that's a hard skill to learn.
That's a hard skill to learn. That's a hard skill to learn because the paradox does present itself. It's like lots of like oversharing.
Yeah.
You know, you're posting, you're broadcasting your life, yet there's certain things that you can't confront within yourself
Yeah.
and hide from.
Yeah.
Good.
Is that a wrap?
I think so.
All right.
Okay.
Until the next one.
Until the next one.